one of the problems and the distrust around science was with
God,
right?
Damn it, bro.
And
I hate. No, I'm good. I love talking about this.
But
oh, that was such a.
You know, the problem, and you know, people were like, oh, you know,
because now you say trust the
these...
science, everyone's like, nope.
Well, the problem is, and I said this right at the beginning, I'm like, 30 years from now, we're going to be able to look back and go, this was good, this was bad, we should have done this, we should have done this. But it's basically like trying to sail the ship while you're building it, right?
I'll never understand that.
You're like basically like, okay, we think, you know, the idea was like, all right, lockdowns will flatten the curve. It'll help from overwhelming the healthcare system. And now looking at the retrospective studies, it seems like lockdowns didn't really help that much.
Yeah.
You know, masks didn't really seem to do a whole lot. You know, this is going to get me in trouble because I'll get hate from both sides. The vaccine works. Do some people have side effects? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But on balance, does it? So this is where people have a really hard time with like holding two facts that seem to be opposing, right? Which is, yes, some people get myocarditis from the vaccine. Like this is shown, okay?
Terrible.
But the rate of myocarditis from the vaccine is still significantly lower than the rate of myocarditis from people who get infected with.
So still people who just never took it got myocarditis through
at a higher rate than people who had it.
Interesting.
So when you're looking at stuff like this, you know, as a person, if you get the vaccine, for example, and then you get myocarditis from the vaccine, you're like, this vaccine, right? But it also saved a lot of lives. Now, when we're making decisions, I think this is what people don't understand, the concept of risk, right? You can wear your seatbelt and have an airbag and still die in a car crash.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean those things don't help, right? And sometimes seatbelts and airbags kill people.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that on balance, on the average, that we see a benefit, right? So this is the problem that a lot of people are struggling with, is they're getting this information about these bad things with the vaccine. And then on the other side, you have people saying, no, there's no side effects. It's all perfectly safe. This is all made up. You know, it's, you know, everybody should have it. And the 15th booster and all that kind of stuff.
I think the problem is not so much in the science itself. It's in the presentation and the sides that are pushing it versus not pushing it.
And here's the problem too.
And it becomes political, which is like, what the f is going on?
But here's the problem. If you give people all that nuance, sometimes you just confuse them, right?
Yeah.
And then if you're, I would, again, I'm going to get myself in trouble, but I don't care.
Doesn't matter.
I'm an independent, but I'm most closely aligned as probably a libertarian. Okay. But, you know, if you're the government and you think that the research data suggests that this vaccine will save a lot of lives, is it more important for you to give all the information and possibly confuse people, or just be like, just take this damn thing so we can save people's lives, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the Machiavellian, do the ends justify the means, you know?
Yeah, it's fucked.
It's always why I always say, I'm glad I'm not in charge, you know? Like, I'm glad I'm not in charge.
I see. I guess the thing that I didn't like during that whole time was like the lack of like focus on everything else that it also affected. The way that, the way that they performed the whole lockdown, all the other stuff that came along with it, that was like, well, what about all this other shit that also is killing people and people are now dealing with, and livelihoods and all this other stuff that's also just being complicated.
The problem is there's always unintended downstream effects that you cannot predict, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing it with the schools, with kids we have a whole generation of kids that's way behind.
Yeah.
You're seeing it with people who were on social media before, but now it's like even worse,
Bro,
you know, in terms of just being completely like sucked in. And I put myself in that category because I kind of do, you know, social media is kind of my job now, weirdly. But like, I'll even find myself sometimes like doom scrolling and being, and having to be like,
it's
what the f am I doing?
Yeah,
you know?
and it's such a weird thing, man, because like it wasn't like this 5 years ago. It wasn't like this even feeling like 4 years ago. It's like it's almost all started to happen the way it did after.
I think.
And it's just like you get sucked into whatever thing you start clicking on, you just get pulled more down that ideology of like this way. So then people are just pinning everyone against each other.
And that's part of the, you see this in the nutrition tribes too, the polarization of stuff and how people just get really entrenched in a position, right? And you see so much cognitive dissonance, which is why, like, even I don't even identify as a libertarian because I see libertarians saying where I'm like, come on, guys. Yeah. Like, no.
I think the thing that really gets me frustrated is like, same thing when it comes to some kid will come to me and go, what's the best diet for this? And I'm like, exactly. There is literally, I cannot give you an answer because there's the only way you know is if you put in the time to see what really works for you. Right. And that's why you say when you talk about even like the whole like do this or don't do this thing, like because they don't want to get into all the nuances of like why this or why that or maybe this, maybe a little less of that. It's because it's not that simple.
No, and unfortunately, simple, clickbaity, do these 3 things.
That's all people want.
Avoid these 3 things.
Yeah.
And I think more than that, I've talked about this, whether it's politics, religion, diet, training, whatever. People get tribal about damn near everything. Chevy versus Ford. People get tribal about everything.
It's a human nature thing. It's fucked.
It is. And I think
it's like speed ramped now.
That's the issue. Yeah. And what you're having is people, you say one thing. Like if you just take a snapshot of me saying, the vaccines probably save lives, people would take that and be like, you libtard,
Yeah.
And it's like,
well, that's also now the digestion of how people are just getting info now. They're not watching the full thing. It's just all out of context clips. And they go, this.
And we tend to go into information silos, right? I said this actually like 10 years ago before social media got bad was, the people I kind of hung around a lot of, other scientists, people who, weren't really dogmatic thinkers who
were not.
Yeah. And, we'd have discussions and disagreements and like when you're talking to a person, like one-on-one, I always say a person is relatively smart. People in groups are really dumb. Yeah. And so that's funny. I just being in that group, I'm like, I don't see why everybody's so upset about things. And then I'd go out and I'd like see some of these things on Twitter and I'd be like, how are motherfuckers this dumb? Yeah. Like it actually blows my mind, but you realize it's not even necessarily an intelligence thing because you have really smart people who believe really dumb shit. All you need to do is go down the list you can find this on a list of Nobel Prize winners who believed in absolute fucking craziness in other fields. Like you had, no, I'm not kidding. There's multiple Nobel Prize winners who believed in eugenics. There were multiple Nobel Prize winners who believed in like healing crystals and shit. Linus Pauling thought that, 18
grams. Crystals don't work? God damn it. My whole fucking room.
Stay tuned for Bradley's crystals coming out with his new line. But just because you're smart in one discipline or you understand things, smart people actually get worse cognitive dissonance in general than unintelligent people because they use their own intelligence to justify, well, I wouldn't believe in bullshit, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this, and I really have to give a lot of credit to my PhD advisor, Don Layman, because he crushed so many of in a kind way, so many of the things that I believe to be true that I just got to the point where I was okay with being wrong, and I was okay with saying, oh, you know what? That's a good point. I never thought of it like that before.